trauma is something that's not just in the brain. Of course, it's in the brain, it's in the mind, it's in the psyche, it's in the soul, but it's something that happens fundamentally in the body. So, for example, if you go outside today and you look outside and you see somebody's been injured, somebody's been hit by a car, and your guts go, ugh. And then as you look more closely, you see the person is really injured. So the brain knows to respond to injury in others with this kind of an alarm. So again, you get, oh. And what can happen is that can get stuck. So, for example, in this example, later on that day or at night when you're going to bed, all of a sudden you see images of the person laying there on the street. And so it's starting to replay itself. So again, I'm not saying this is not the biggest trauma, but it's a useful example. So anyhow, the guts stay in that clenched position, and that happens when we're traumatized, and of course to a much greater degree. But it's okay if I say a little neurobiological information, that there's a nerve that connects mind and body, profoundly connects mind and body. It's called the vagus nerve, and it's a very primitive nerve. It's the largest nerve in the body, and it goes from the back of the brainstem down into below the diaphragm to all the organs, especially the gastrointestinal system, and also to the lungs and to the heart. Actually, Darwin in the 1860s wrote about this. He called it the pneumogastric nerve. And he realized that it was responsible, in his words, for gut wrench and heartbreak. And so the question is, how do we get in and how do we change the information that's coming from the guts of the brain? So again, you see the injury, the message comes from the brain down into the guts. The guts go, yuck. That nerve is 80% afferent, is 80% sensory. In other words, 80% of that largest nerve in the body is coming from the organs and is relayed back up to the brain, where it can get amplified. And so if you're exposed to this kind of threat and injury over time, it can start to become chronic. And as it becomes more and more chronic, then often people develop symptoms like gastrointestinal problems, irritable bowel, and so forth. So again, they can lead to physical symptoms, and they tend to reinforce and amplify themselves. So we want to be able to get a new signal coming from our guts up to our brains to say the threat is over, it's okay. Because when our body is in the past, our mind will continue to replay the past as though it's happening in the present. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say I know a lot of people who I've treated in therapy have no autobiographical memory of the incident. Say it was pre-verbal, happened when they were very young. I know when parents bring me their kids, they'll say, I'll ask about like, how was your labor? What was birth like? What were the first couple of years like? And they say, well, that doesn't really matter. My child won't remember that. And what would you say to that when parents say, and I, of course, you can give the spiel. I have my spiel, but let's hear your spiel.
I would say your child will definitely remember it, not as a simple memory, as a declarative memory, but as a body memory, what's sometimes called a procedural memory, or also emotional memories. So all of a sudden the child has, in certain situations, an emotional outburst that just doesn't make sense. And again, there can be many reasons for emotional reactions like this. But the child will maybe often do it in play, and they'll reenact the trauma in their play and do it over and over and over in an attempt, often a futile attempt, to resolve that trauma through play. And again, play in itself, while it's helpful, isn't really the full solution, but it can give you an indication of what the child might be carrying in their body and in their mind from things that happened way before there was any memory, any conscious memory, any
Yeah, your
deliberate.
explicit memory system. Yeah.
Explicit memory system, exactly. And this is an implicit system involving emotional memories and procedural memories, body memory. So, for example, uh, the expression that you never forget how to ride a bicycle. So, if you think of the situation where the child is on the bicycle and the parent is right with them by their side, or an older sibling, and they go together, they walk together with the child, and then when the child gets the balance, then they let go and the child rides the bicycle for the first time, and that will then go linger for virtually for decades.
Yeah.
I mean, I started riding a bicycle again when I was in my 70s, and as soon as I got on, I knew immediately what to do. If you gave me verbal instructions, that wouldn't help. If it was written in a book, that wouldn't help. You can't learn skiing from a book. You have to experience it in your body. So
Yeah.
that's one of the keys. And these memories are sometimes called procedural memories. So, like the child on the bicycle, that will be a positive body memory and will be lasting. But what happens if the child is injured at that first attempt, or injured in some other situation in some other way? Then that procedural memory will also continue unabated until something shifts. So that something is really a lot of what somatic experiencing is about. And the question, of course, is how to work with children when they've had potentially some kind of a traumatic event. So I'm not talking about children who were abused and neglected at this point. That's different. But these are the things that happen to children routinely. They'll have their falls. They'll they'll wind up in the emergency room because they've broken because of they've gone through a plate glass window, or they've swallowed something and they need to have their stomach pumped. This can be traumatic, but if we as parents know things that we can do, we can not only minimize the likelihood of trauma occurring, but in providing their learning capacity for resilience, so that they'll be more resilient for that, but also for later potentially traumatic events.